Welcome back to the Brand New Actor podcast with your host, Deanna Gamboa. Today, we are exploring in episode 6, the power of the narrative. What's your story and how does it reflect your brand? Well, let's read the next chapter to find out. Introduction. What's your story? Who are you as the individual? Not the actor. Who are you as a person? What are your likes, your dislikes, your beliefs, your values? Who are you? Having a strong sense of self is very important for an actor. As a matter of fact, it was so important that my BFA program decided that we had to write a 10-page paper answering that very question of who am I? And I have to say, of course, in the moment, it seemed a bit ridiculous. However, I did understand later on why we had to do that assignment. And it's fundamentally because you need to have a strong sense of your identity and yourself so you can do the inward, outward approach of creating characters. If you're able to notice and see the differences and the similarities between you and a character, and you're able to empathize with that character, maybe you haven't gone through the specific trauma that they've gone through, but to be able to connect to your own story and say, hey, I have experienced loss, not like this character, but I can connect with that, I can empathize with that, that's amazing. We have something to work with ourselves to then build these characters. We don't have to get into, the dangers of method acting, in which we have seen time and time again actors psychologically lose themselves, lose their identity in these characters because they lose themselves. So don't do that. And I encourage you, start writing down, and it doesn't have to be a 10-page paper, just start writing down your values, your beliefs, your likes, your dislikes, your allergies, your trauma, your struggles, your triumphs. Just start writing everything down. Journaling is cool too. Whatever floats your boat, just do it. So you can always just reflect back on who you are. Chapter 1. Now that you know your story, you've written these key things, or you have them in your noggin, start thinking about key elements to your story. What are the moments, the memories that really have made an imprint on your identity? What are the struggles that you face that you feel have made you who you are today? Or maybe you haven't been through a lot of trauma or a lot of struggles, but what is it about, your childhood or growing up, your memories that have brought you so much joy? Just think of those moments, those key elements to your story that make you who you are. Chapter 2. Once you have all of the key elements to your story, start thinking about how those elements influence the art that you want to produce, the message that you want to portray through your art and share with the world. It doesn't have to be anything super profound. Just think of those elements in your story that really shape who you are today, and try to find a way to put it in your art. So, for instance, if you think of Friends, the TV show, or Seinfeld, these shows are rooted on the message of friendship and the importance of friendship. And so maybe you have the most awesomest friend group and you create a show like that. Seinfeld, for instance, was actually based on real life events of the director. So see how these key elements, your story, could have the potential of becoming a television show or a film and be successful? Yeah. It's your real life on camera and some other people's lives on camera. Or perhaps, maybe you went through a traumatic experience and you feel that is important to share something about this experience, to be part of the narrative, whether it's domestic abuse or violence, whatever the case may be. And you just feel like you need to be part of the story, by all means, do it. Chapter 3. So after you start producing art that reflects your story and the messages that you want to share with the world, you're gonna see that people are gonna start associating you with this. And that starts to create what we call your brand. So you get known for doing this. You don't believe me? Well, just reflect on a bunch of actors and what they're known for. A lot of times people say, oh, this person's known for their comedy. Adam Sandler, he's always in the family comedy shows, or he's doing his stand-up comedy. Or Jim Carrey or Robin Williams, they're really known for their comedy and eccentric characters, or the list can go on and on and on, and you get my drift. The point is that when you start to use your narrative, that narrative that is so personal to you, and infuse it into your art, it's going to be a part of your brand. It's going to be a way that people can identify you as the individual, because no one cares is acting, that's all entertainment. And yes, part of our job is to entertain people, but a lot of the times people are watching, theater and television and film because they get connected to the humanity, the real raw emotion of what they're seeing. So what better way to capture them than using our own narratives, using the power of our own narratives to tell a story? My testimony. Well, now that you've been listening to this episode, it's about time that I share my story and the key element of that story and how I've used that to infuse in my art and continue and hope that I can be a part of certain projects that would really hone into my artistic statement. So I moved from Stamford, Connecticut to Hialeah, Florida at the age of 13 years old. And if you don't know what that means, it means I moved from Stamford, Connecticut, which is predominantly white, but there's quite a bit of diversity in schools and such. I moved from there to what they call Little Cuba, is what some people could nickname Hialeah. And don't get me wrong, I love Hialeah. I am not trashing Hialeah at all. But when I first got there, it was hard. It was a major culture shock for me. And yes, I am Cuban American, first generation. My parents came here, my grandparents came here. And I was fortunately born here, well, in New York, which is very different. And I had a lot of trouble with the move because not only was it culture shock, but this evolved to like an identity crisis that I had, in which I didn't feel Cuban enough because I struggled to speak the language and I didn't understand some of the traditions or the culture as profoundly as I thought I did. I thought, hey, if I just eat Cuban food that my mom makes and speak a little Spanish, that I would have been fine. No. I definitely felt like a yo no sabo kid. And if you know what that means, if you don't know what that means, it means that I didn't know Spanish that well. So I did not know how to speak properly. And, it kind of makes you rejected and feeling a little isolated, which attributed to this identity crisis that I had. And I just didn't feel Cuban enough. And then, my friends back in Connecticut were like, oh, you have like an accent now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I not American enough now? So I was just like in between the hyphen of two cultures. And I just didn't know where I fit in. So with that being said, I was able to go from hating my culture and hating the language to embracing it, because I was really getting in touch with my roots and learning a lot. But it was because of artists that paved the way for me. And it wasn't Celia Cruz. I love Celia Cruz, but she was not the one that paved the way for me because she's Cuban. I needed to identify with someone that could really understand what I was going through. So watching the musical On Your Feet for the first time, I saw how Gloria Estefan, though she was born in Cuba, she came here at a young age and she learned English. She was more Americanized. She sang in English with Cuban rhythm beats, and I loved that. And Selena Quintanilla from Mexico as well. She didn't know Spanish. And they had her singing in Spanish. And so I can attest to say today that not only do I speak Spanish, I can sing, perform in Spanish, which is a major accomplishment. And I've been able to embrace my culture. So how does this affect me, my story, this key element to my story of my identity crisis? Well, I want to do stories. I want to be a part of projects that are about the first, second generation of immigrants. And I say this because, with all due respect, I honor what my parents did coming here, my grandparents coming here to this country. But their stories, I feel a bit removed from, just because I didn't immigrate. I don't have the unfortunate case of having to be in fear because someone's going to put me to be deported. I don't have that. I feel for them, I empathize for them, and I can play that role if I have to because I understand it. But I do think that there needs to be narratives, new narratives of the first and second generation of what our struggles are as well. Because, time is changing and we're evolving. We just had a Hispanic woman win an award the other day, and I was like, that was the first Hispanic woman? Really? That's crazy. And we're going to have, possibly a Black female president. I mean, we already had a Black president. So my point is, we're evolving. Stop casting African Americans as the slave. Stop casting, Hispanics as the typical maid. How about the maid that worked her way to get through school and get a degree, and now she's living her best life? We should be talking about the progression of, us, immigrants, and, but it's we're stuck on those old narratives, and they're very important. Don't misinterpret me. They're very important, and those stories should still be told. But I'm just saying that we need to add new narratives as well to the community, if you get my drift. And those are the stories that I want to be a part of. Some final words. Think of yourself. This is a reflection. Are you an open book or a closed book? Someone that is an open book is doing exactly what I've been talking about all episode long. They are sharing their personal stories, anecdotes. They're looking to show their personality, their character, who they are in an audition room. They're telling casting who they are so casting can place them where they belong and fit. Versus someone that is a closed book, which sometimes I'm guilty. I stay as a closed book, but then casting doesn't get to know my personality, who I am. And they're like, this person's pretty good, but like, who are they and where do I put them? Because I don't know them that well. I don't know. I didn't make that personable connection. I just don't know where to put them. And the problem with being a closed book is that you are letting them to judge the book by its cover. They just look at you and they have to think, okay, well, she looks Hispanic. She looks like she can speak a lot of Spanish. And I'm like, no, I can't. So be sure to use your narrative, your story. Show your personality so they know where to put you. It's all about the power of the narrative that is going to cultivate your brand and get you in your career where you want to be. Thanks for tuning into The Brand New Actor. This is episode 6, The Power of the Narrative, with your host, Deanna Gamboa. Be sure to tune into a new episode every second to last Sunday of the month at 6 p.m. on Spotify or YouTube.